Hi friends, welcome back. In this video, we're going to bust 3 myths regarding housing affordability and also inventory shortage, because it's portrayed in the media often as if this is something like, a holy cow and nothing can be done about it. But the truth is, there are solutions out there that are happening right now, and more people like you and I must be aware of those. Important, isn't it? Why? Well, because it directly affects our quality of life, cost of living, and it's a very huge factor for all of those families, right? And also, importantly, as I always say, we're going to stop feeling like the inventory shortage and the housing affordability and the whole real estate crisis is happening to us, but rather we're going to start feeling like we have control over where the market is going on our terms. Important, isn't it? And to make this interview much more persuasive, I'm going to include 3 expert opinions, influencers, who are going to share their thoughts on this whole situation with the housing crisis, affordability, and inventory shortage. Buckle up, let's go. And super quickly, I'm Anya Bartholomew, your Utah local real estate agent. I also happen to be the #1 best-selling author of the book, The Future of Real Estate, because I care about real estate. Anyway, if you're interested in buying, selling, or relocating, my information is below. Reach out. Myth number 1, the inventory shortage is actually something organic to the economy. Well, maybe not. The truth is, in 2019, and actually every academic in the University of Utah that I talked about, but also Harvard Business School revealed that in 2019 that the inventory shortage is man-made. By whom? By local governments. In those 3 interviews that I'm going to share with you, you will see glimpses and more understanding, like more visceral understanding of that. But specifically for this case, it's all about zoning and about restrictions. And to make my statement and support Harvard Business School, I'm actually just simply going to post a link in the remarks about the study that I just found that were done in Austin, Texas and Houston, Texas, where zoning regulations were completely different. In Austin, the regulations were overly regulated, and then in Houston, actually it was more of a free market real estate zoning laws, and you're going to see what difference it really makes on the development of the community and also on affordability. And I actually went to Zillow and started comparing prices. I just plugged in 4 bedrooms, 2 baths in Austin and in Houston, and I was very, very, very surprised. So, do this experiment for yourself. Let me know what you think about it. Well, let's bust myth number 2, and that is that politicians are actually villains that cannot, I'm being metaphorical, of course, that cannot solve this problem. Well, I really like the perspective of my millennial son, who said, well, Mom, it's just like unintended circumstances. They mean well, but there is just nothing that they can do because the whole machine is out of control. And I like his opinion, because I'd rather kind of like be a little bit more optimistic in terms of judging people and, stuff like that. But anyway, let's see what it really means, if it's really true or not. And I'm going to provide the segment of the interview with the mayor of the city that is actually might prove that myth really completely wrong.
One of the most important things one of the most powerful tools that we have as a society to impact the built environment and to impact what we have for available inventory is planning and zoning. And that's an opportunity too for everyday citizens to get involved just by showing up at their local planning and zoning meetings and participating in the process. The city of Sandpoint here, we're actually in the process of revising our comprehensive land use plan right now, and that will continue through this year. And that's really the guiding document that casts the community vision for how we want our city to look and feel and function in terms of land use for the next 20 years and beyond. And so those moments, every city has a comprehensive plan, land use plan like that. And so, those are fantastic opportunities for public engagement, for citizens to, stand up and be heard, get educated, and share your thoughts and opinions about the kind of community that you want to live in, because that land use plan ultimately is going to affect how zoning codes are established, and what the regulations of those zoning codes are, what can be built, and how big and where, and what are the setbacks and how high, and there's so many factors that play into there's so many different factors that play into how a city is built, and that ultimately has a dramatic impact on affordability and density and all the things that we care about, both from the perspective of, is it affordable to live there, and is it a place that you'd even want to live in? So there's really a lot there. So more specifically, some of the things that we're looking at are just densities. I mean, the bottom line is, if the more density that you can bring into an area, it essentially amounts to efficient use of space. And if we can fit 10 units on an acre instead of 5, then that's going to make those 10 units are going to be more affordable than the 5, just because ultimately the land is a little bit cheaper. And so there's a lot that we can do to encourage density and to provide certain bonuses for increased density when we get the kind of built environment and the kind of housing product that we want as a community. And again, back to that, civic engagement, that it's really an opportunity for everybody to engage in that community conversation, because it really is a give and take, and it's up to every individual community to determine what is the appropriate level of density, because there's trade-offs, because with more density comes with more parking issues and more crowding at public parks and other city services. So there are trade-offs, but right now I feel like we're in a crisis of affordability, and so I think we need to start thinking a little bit more creatively and take a few more risks with regards to inviting more density and more aggressive infill within our urban areas to accommodate more affordable housing options. More options and more affordable housing options.
So it was my powerful intent to really get you in a perspective from inside out on the politician who is actually got elected, and he runs on a very strong housing platform. In my next video, I'm going to show you what he is actually doing. But I thought what he described with us today is actually very insightful and shows you that some politicians are on board, and that's why we've got to find those, and we've got to put them in the seats where they can make good decisions. Myth number 3, the builders are the villains, right? Well, here's the interview with the builder. And what I want you to pay attention to is that something that I discovered in the interview. Yes, there is some good information, but also notice that the builders and the politicians as well are actually pretty, I don't want to say afraid, I don't know what the other word is, but, kind of afraid of the social media. They're afraid of the power that you and I have to cast our vibrational vote towards something that we want and against something that we do not want. So they really are aware of that power that none of us are actually tapping quite yet, and yet there's a huge potential.
In Utah, the legislation or the law is called Land Use Development and Management Act. And so that's where we get the prescription for how we use our rights. So let's talk about the current market, for example. Most everyone understands the right way to use property. But in today's world, we have this little thing called social media. And social media interferes from the standpoint of giving a vocal minority a big platform where it feels like that's the whole community that's talking about a specific need or use, when in fact it's some people that have personal intent and magnify the story to make it look bigger than it really is. You may, for example, have a family farm that's part of your retirement, and you knew what would be allowed as a property right, on that farm. So one day, whether it's you or the next generations through an estate want to do something with that property that is allowed through those zoning ordinances, through those land use guidelines, and the landowner next to you wants to always see cattle and horse and crops grown, well, they can't take your property right because they're enjoying something that isn't in their ownership. And so this owner says, well, you can't put a house there because I won't be able to see the horse anymore. That, no matter how many people come out and yell about that, the government can't take that from you without compensation. And so because they can't, they don't. But our elected officials get afraid of that minority voice in dictating land use problems that then frustrate the community. And so let me, and I hope that's answering Anya in as simple as way as I can, but let me give you an example. Let's say that the baby boom generation wants a small dwelling unit on a small lot and that everything's taken care of them by a homeowners association so they can spend time with family and recreate by traveling. And let's say that a millennial generation has a need for a small home and a small lot with everything maintained because they like technology, want to spend more time at work, and want to recreate. So we have the second biggest generation, the baby boomers, and the biggest generation, the millennials, that have similar ideals for housing. That's what the market is demanding. Yet we have zoning ordinances that dictate that that can't occur. For example, half-acre lot minimum, all brick house. You know some of the setbacks, all the different requirements that prevent people from being able to have what their current need is as it relates to the housing. And so what happened as it relates to land use is that we had loud voices pushing back against the meeting the market's demand. And so the default to maintain that affordability for those that are building homes actually started building dwelling units that are attached. We call them townhomes. They used to be condominiums until condominium legal action made it difficult to build condominiums. And so there's been an emphasis towards meeting that demand by going to those areas where you can build that affordability. Apartments, have you noticed there's more apartments being built? Well, that's because that's another way to meet that demand because affordability is so pressurized. But we could meet that demand if we just change the land use ordinance to allow for what the market demands. And so that's where we come at, where we try to make the efforts to say, look, Anya and I want a small lot with a small dwelling unit, might be all on one level, and it has these ideals, but where do you build that? Name one place, Anya, you're in real estate. Name one place we can build that today.
Nothing comes to mind, to be.
It's very difficult. It's very,
honest.
very difficult. And so we need to work with the city planners, with the elected officials, et cetera, in overcoming those voices that just want to keep the growth out. And the thing, Anya, I don't want to be negative, but I want to paint a perspective as it relates to who we know makes some of these complaints. We'll have people that live in a townhome come out and complain about a townhome project being built, saying that they don't want that there. And you think, well, if you go back 5 years, you were in the pasture and you're living in the unit you're complaining about allowing somebody else to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't be all townhomes being built if we'd allow for the market to meet the demand
Right.
in terms of building that product and that style that we need.
And myth number 4. Well, all of the theoretical stuff might be working. People might be, having good intentions, but in practicality, there is nothing we can do. I don't think so. In this upcoming interview, you're going to see the architect who's dedicated his life of making those affordable projects a reality, and he's done it over and over and over again. And I would love for you to see one of the two case studies that she shares with us as to how successful a few of us bundled together for the right course can actually produce those results for ourselves, for our community, for our loved ones, for our friends, and overall for the well-being and the cost of living and the lifestyle of the community.
Housing community started by basically 5 women who needed a house that was $130,000 or less. That was the time, 1995, when the average house in Berkeley was $500,000. So how did they get it? 4 of them were single moms and 1 was an elderly woman. How did they get it? Well, the first thing they did is they came to the table with the intent. And if you want an intentional community, that's a serious intent. We're going to make this thing affordable first and foremost. We managed to get them all into cute little houses in a little co-housing community. A couple years ago, we had 6 people in Stillwater, Oklahoma, who needed a new house for $150,000 each. 6 people. That's a total rabbit out of a hat. It's more or less impossible. And the only way that happened was by having the future residents at the table. And one of the reasons that's so huge, that plays such a big role in getting affordable housing, is that group of people bought a single family house for $425,000 in the most expensive neighborhood in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's generally not as expensive, but it is expensive to build there now. But anyway, they bought a $425,000 house, single family house that a 90-year-old had just died in, and they had it rezoned to 24 houses. Who does that? Who can buy a site that's zoned for, let's say, 24 houses and get it rezoned? Buy a house. If it was zoned for 24 houses, it would have cost $1 million. That site would have. But they bought it for $425,000, and because it was zoned as a single family house, and the only people that are ever going to get housings rezoned, for the most part, sites rezoned in America, my experience, for the most part, having worked for developers and co-housing groups, co-housing groups are much more capable of getting housing or sites rezoned to multifamily. We've been doing that over and over again, where groups buy a site that's a single family house. We just did it in Vancouver. They put on 31 houses. It was 2 single family houses right next to each other, 31 houses. It meant the site was a lot cheaper, and nobody can do it like a co-housing. You put 3 nursing moms up at the podium and you ask, and who are asking the city councilor, why wouldn't you approve this? I need to get my kid into school next September. Approve it tonight. And they bring the moral turpitude to the table that land use almost never has.
As you can see, there were 3 influencers that I presented to you: the politicians, the builder, and the architect that hands-on in the clay architect, who are actually actively involved in the affordability crisis and the inventory shortage. They do have good intentions, they do have great ideas, and they do have leverage. They showed us where the leverage is, and therefore it is really up to you and I what we're going to do with information like that. And therefore I will continue to post videos like that, and I invite you to share your opinion, whether it's a good opinion, bad opinion, positive, negative, I don't care. But as long as we have the conversation of the topic, we will stop feeling that the market is happening on our behalf, because we can step in and start taking control of that great market. This is an abundant country, a country of abundance, and we've got to live our real estate lives here accordingly. Do you agree? And as always, if you find this information interesting, insightful, or thought-provoking, leave your comments, click like, subscribe to my channel, and most importantly, please tell me what your thoughts on the subjects are, because we're all in it together.